Hello friends, my name is host Eric. I'm the host of Talking with Famous People, and this video I'm going to discuss quantum consciousness and the implications of understanding reality and consciousness through the idea of collapsing from two possibilities. So in current parlance, when we talk about collapsing superpositions from a quantum pre-extant possibility state or something. But I think that kind of language is really just for YouTube appeal or something. Really what we can talk about here is something that has been talked about in philosophy for as long as we can remember, which is just conditionality. The idea that we can have two contingencies prior to one of them being realized in time, right? That it might be the case that the garbage truck comes today because it's Monday, or it might be the case that the garbage truck doesn't come because it's a holiday. One of those two contingencies is going to turn out to be correct, the other incorrect. And we can do reasoning or planning anyway. Not reasoning. We can do planning based on the idea that one contingency might occur and the other might not. Now, in that instance I gave, the action would be indicated would be take the trash up Sunday night because you don't know whether the garbage man is coming on Monday. Don't take it up Monday night because he might be coming on Tuesday, right? This is our relationship with contingencies in the most commonplace occurrence. So what does this, where am I going with this? Okay. I probably should have started with the foregoing. I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos lately, a lot of sciencey YouTube videos. Things like videos on the speed of light, videos on consciousness, videos on... Hey, Rachel. Okay. So I've been watching a lot of YouTube. Science videos. One of them was a video on this idea of quantum consciousness. Now, it might sound like just pure woo-woo, right? Like, what does that even mean? But there are multiple theories of consciousness, and a good theory of consciousness from a biophysical standpoint needs to explain states of anesthesia. There are various inert gases, including argon, that have anesthetic states, and scientists are unsure why or how that occurs because these gases are inert, so there's no chemical reaction, right? If there's no chemical reaction, then biochemistry provides no answer to the question of consciousness, right? And if we understand consciousness as something that can be temporarily turned off by a general anesthetic, then we have to be able to understand better what consciousness is by how we can turn it off, right? So anyway, that's what this video I was watching was about. I'll put the link in the description below. People say that in long form videos. Anyhow, what I wanted to get to here, and I'm taking a while to get there, is how we pay attention can be understood through this idea of determining contingencies. I'm going to use regular people language like that rather than quantum stuff. But to sum up the video's notion, essentially there are these microtubulars, they're called or something? I don't know, microtubes of some kind. But in your brain and maybe elsewhere in your body, in your cells, I think it is. And somebody proposed the theory that while scientists for a long time have dismissed the idea of quantum consciousness because they don't believe that a quantum state can be attained in this warm, wet environment, in order to get a highly effective quantum computer, they have to cool it down to nearly absolute zero. But new evidence suggests some of these microtubes, because of their structure, that it may actually be able to attain it. I'm not so interested in the physics of the matter or the physicalities of the matter. what brought my interest to it is the way that we can use this idea of collapsing from two possibilities into one across four different frames to explain all of human consciousness that can be explained, that doesn't need the physicalities as part of its mechanics to be an explanation. Okay. So regardless of what the physicalities of the brain are or the body, and how those relate to our expression of conscious being through time, it is possible for us to understand, since we always move forward in time, that we pay attention in four possible ways. We know, we interface, we act, we decide. Right now I'm acting, right? I'm taking an action called telling to you about something, explaining something. I could be taking another kind of action, like punching somebody or whatever, or drinking a sip of coffee. Now, as I drink that sip of coffee, a couple of things happen. First, I spilled a little bit of it on myself. And second, I felt it going down my throat. So we can understand, prior to that moment, there were contingencies. I might have taken a sip of coffee. I might not have taken a sip of coffee. And prior to me taking a sip of coffee, there were contingencies. There were sub-contingencies. If I do take a sip of coffee, I might spill a little bit on myself. I might not spill a little bit on myself. There was also a non-contingent reality that would definitely follow from if I took a sip of coffee and swallowed it, which is I would feel it going down my throat. So we can look at all those events in terms of ways of paying attention. The first is I need to make a decision to do something to exemplify the concept of doing, right? And how it can be done in two ways. I can talk or I can take a physical action of some sort. First, I tried punching, but there's nothing for me to punch. I don't feel like punching someone with my hands. So I changed my mind then. I made another decision to get this cup of coffee, right? So the deciding between possible things I might physically do occurred. Then the execution of the thing occurred. Now, like this can be executed in a myriad possible ways. I could tip the cup a little bit like this, move it. That might all accidentally change as I'm doing this. Although no sip of coffee is exactly identical to any previous sip of coffee. But for the purposes of understanding things, it's simply an event demarcated as having taken a sip of coffee. Okay, so we know, we decide, we take action, and we interface. I'm not going to be able to show you any real interface on this video because I'm in an action-friendly environment. I'm making a video where I explain things in full. I take the full action out, lay out all the things I want to explain. And then if there's going to be any interaction with it, the other person does the same approach. They watch the video and then they write a comment, blah, 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 right? Or maybe they make a video. So it's turn-based in that fashion. And that's one of the ways in which human beings engage through time. We do turn-based things. This is an example of one. If I was having a video conference right now with somebody else, I would not be the only one talking. They'd take turns talking with me. It would be a totally different video, and it would be a video that engaged a lot of interface, intentionally. So let's leave interface then at that and move on to knowledge. What I know is what I've been thinking about prior to this, starting this video. All these concepts, all this stuff, that I've been watching in the YouTube videos, right? I know that because I experienced it and I've learned it. There are other things that I know because of intuition / internal sensing, okay? I'll start with the SI one. When I spilled coffee on myself, I knew I had done so because I felt the wetness and the heat on my stomach, right? As the coffee went through my shirt. That knowledge was instantaneous. I didn't have to deliberate or make a decision about what that feeling was, right? I could tell immediately that it was wetness. It was obviously from the coffee. The intuition that it was wetness from the coffee and I spilled the coffee and not raindrops, right? That's just sort of the most basic kind of intuition. There's only one wet thing around here. This coincides in time exactly with my shirt getting wet, my feeling the wetness in my stomach right as I could feel it spilling out around my lips. So intuitively, obviously, the thing that got me wet is the thing that most obviously should have gotten me wet. That's what intuition is, right? That's a very simple kind of intuition that everybody does all the time. Other things are more complicated intuitively, like look at that woman's facial expression. What mood is she in right now? You might say that's a bad example. Let's say you're in a store looking at some convenience store looking at some bags of chips, and a guy comes in, and your intuition says, "Whoa, I think this store's about to get robbed." There's something about the way the guy's carrying himself, his body language, etc., that you intuitively go, I think this is going to happen. Or let's say in a show you're watching, you go, "Oh, I bet that character's not really there. I bet it's a hallucination of that other character." You just intuited something about the story from some cues in the story that allow you to guess that this thing is going on. Or it might be a red herring, right? They might take advantage of and make it a little too obvious for your intuition, and then later on it turns out that that's not the case in the storyline. We enjoy stories that play with our intuition like that. In any case, whenever we know something, it happens instantaneously. It just comes to us like as a gut, like, uh-oh, something's going to go down here. Or it comes to us from our memory, like the specifics I remembered about that video on quantum consciousness that I watched. So the deciding part, well, we can talk about the deciding as occurring in a couple of ways. If I'm talking about, say, deciding who's correct about something, Joe says, "I think I should be able to hammer because it's my hammer and I own it." And Julie says, "Well, I think it's my turn to hammer because I own the saw and he was using that earlier. Now I should get to use his hammer." And he said, "Yeah, well, you let me use the saw. I never promised to let you use anything in return. So, no, you can't use my hammer." And then I would say, "Okay, well, your only remedy is to say, well, you'll never be allowed to use my saw again or whatever." But unfortunately, he's going to have to win this argument. Now, that's deciding predicated on the facts and evidence, and also on some knowledge about property rights and so forth, right? Obviously, in a context like that, who's correct is going to probably be a little bit more contextually contingent, right? A better example for deciding something is to answer a problem like if 2 plus 10 plus 7 is one pile of apples, and 5 plus 7 plus 9 is another pile of apples, which pile of apples should you take if you want more apples? Well, in that case, you're going to need to do some addition and determine that it is the second pile of apples. It's not going to be instantaneous. The more numbers I put into there, the more you're going to have to deliberate that which you decide. So the idea, the distinction being made here attentionally is that there are some ways we decide things and there are some ways we know. There are also ways to take action, and there are also ways to interface. Let me pause this. So the takeaway from this is that all forms of paying attention are ways to determine contingencies or collapse superpositions. When you know something, you've collapsed a superposition of having a previous reality with a new reality. So it's like, I know that now that I spilled coffee on my shirt, there's little coffee spots on it. And they'll dry eventually. I know that from experience, right? But what's happened here is I've collapsed the superposition between shirt with no coffee stain on it and shirt with coffee stain on it. I've collapsed it by knowing the distinction. I've collapsed it by taking the action in which the thing occurred. In other words, taking the action of taking a sip of coffee poorly. I knew it in the moment from the sensation of it. And I know that it's still there because I recall the event. So I've collapsed a lot of superpositions there. When I decided to grab this coffee and take a sip instead of just punch my fist at the air, then I collapsed that superposition, right? And I collapsed it with the decision to do something. When I actually took the action, I collapsed it, right? When I made the decision to take the action, I collapsed that possibility of doing this or that, right? And now I'm locked into this example as a core thing to build the ideas around. When I interface is another way of collapsing possible superpositions. There might be, when you think about this video, it could have been done better. I may have missed key points. Maybe I was wrong about something, right? Those possibilities exist and will be collapsed in the comment section into, yes, you left this out. This is dumb. You did this badly. People's expression of their positions on the matter, which will impact, of course, but not determine my positions on the video. So even if consciousness is not proved to be of quantum nature, which is to say, some physical structures in the brain creating quantum environments that collapse superpositions, it's still the case that human consciousness can be understood as different ways of determining contingencies. And the ways I've talked about, acting, knowing, interfacing, deciding, each have two possible expressions, a physical and a metaphysical. So ultimately, this linkage is to Jungian cognitive functions, if you're not familiar with them. They are the underlying idea behind the 16 personality types, but they give us an excellent, regardless of what you think of that, they give us an excellent framework to understand all of our instances of being, because each instance of being can be expressed as either an instance of extroverted intuition, putting language out, an instance of extroverted sensing, doing something physically to the environment, an instance of, those are the two ways of acting, right? An instance of knowing from memory or experience, like the wetness on my shirt and my recalling the event, knowing from intuition, like knowing that the answer to 7 plus 4 plus 2 plus 6 is 18 plus 4, 18, then that took some time to decide, right? It's collapsing the possibility of it being this number, that number, or some other number. When I make a decision with my own personal interests, such as, I really want to do this right now, I feel like doing this, or I really want to buy that thing and I'd buy it, or I really love you so much, or whatever, or I really don't like that. When I'm making decisions based on my personal interests, it also takes you time to feel through your feelings and decide what you really want more. Like, do you want to indulge in the moment? Do you want to work on some medium or long-term plan? Do you want to rest, etc.? And those things take sign of time to decide by seeing through your feelings. I'm not an expert on that process. And then in terms of interfacing, there are also ways of deciding things. TE, in extrovert thinking, is a way of solving problems by looking at a prospective task and understanding it as a set of ordinated steps. For example, I'm cleaning my driveway. Extroverted thinking helps me decide to put the pile there in the middle rather than on one of the edges, so I can push from every side towards it. Is it more efficient that way? I don't know. But that's how I decided to solve that problem. And it was a set of subtasks, right? I start at the top of the driveway. And how am I collapsing possibilities? Well, in that instance, it's determining how quickly or efficiently I do the thing, predicated on the decisions I made about how to do it before I started doing it. With the other interface function, extroverted feeling, you're engaging with other people, asking questions or talking to them, and understanding how you're doing based on their reactions. So I'm going to understand how well I did on this video based on whether or not people like it or comment or what have you. And in that regard, I will be hoping that this video upholds the value of that interface function, even though the interface is limited to turn-based because you can only respond in text or make your own response video. Anyway, hopefully that was informative or interesting or something. I think I'll probably just upload this straight. It seems like a complete piece of work and it's 20 minutes. So thanks a lot for watching. Love you all and see you around.